Whenever I am alone at home with my thoughts, they inevitably drift to Kenya's Maasai Mara and its rolling plains, open skies, and incredible wildlife. I can feel the crisp, cool air on my face before dawn as we head out with the excitement and anticipation that only comes on safari. I can hear the joyous birdsong as the sun rises over the plains, waking up the land with the promise of a new day. And I can smell the scent of rain as storms build on the afternoon horizon. It's a land steeped in history and heritage, where giants roam and where Maasai warriors blend ancient knowledge of the wild with modern conservation. It's a place I love and somewhere that has played a significant role in shaping who I am and my photographic journey. Welcome to the Wild Voices podcast with Dan Clarkson.
Hello.
And me, Laura Dyer, where today we will be introducing the Maasai Mara and why we love it so much. We will discuss what made us fall in love with this place, what keeps us coming back, and why it is inspiring for photography and all wildlife lovers. We will also touch on the Maasai people and what makes us such an interesting culture to explore. Join us as we bring you the Maasai Mara Part 1. Well, I guess the first time I really fell in love with the Mara was in January 2021 when we were there, and you'll remember the day when we finally saw this mum cheetah. We were just driving past this big hill, and in this little muddy area, all of a sudden there's this mother cheetah, and I say to James, could you just stop the car for a second? I need to have a look. And it was just this mum with her 3 tiny, tiny little cubs that nobody even knew was pregnant. And it was during COVID, so there was nobody else around, and down she came from the hill, and that was pretty much...
Yeah, I remember you just suddenly saying, "Cheetah, stop!" And you were just so excited. No one else believed you.
No,
I mean, I must admit, I didn't believe you. James definitely didn't believe you.
Yeah, it seemed like a really far out spot, but, it was true.
Well, you were confident and correct, as it turned out.
Yeah, it was amazing. And, getting to spend that time with her, I think for us, it completely changed our view of the Maasai Mara, and it completely changed the way we view sort of filmmaking and photography, being able to follow one cat's story like we did for her as she raised these 3 little things all to adulthood. I mean, that was incredible, right?
Yeah, that was pretty special. I mean, we were lucky enough to follow her for the whole year, just about, because we came back in, July?
Almost 18 months.
In July, we did November, December.
Yeah.
All just spending time with Nema and her 3.
Yeah, I think it must have been a good 4 months of that year that we were actually in Kenya, or that I was in Kenya in any case. And so many days spent with her, and getting to know Cheetah like that, I think it's a very intimate knowledge that you can't build unless you're actually spending that amount of time with an animal. And yeah, I mean, that was really, really special. I guess that for me was the beginning of a really wonderful relationship with the Mara. I mean, if you think about it, was COVID. We were very, very lucky that we managed to get out there that January, and we sort of spent 3 months in a row there just exploring the 3 different conservancies. So it was a strange time. There was hardly anyone else around, but I mean, how we got to know it was quite incredible.
It was, you're right. It was a very strange time. And at a point where you weren't really allowed to hug family or friends or see people you cared for. Suddenly we were in this equatorial bubble, with a whole bunch of people that the rest of the world forgot about. But it did really mean that we were able to immerse ourselves in Kenya, in the Mara, in the culture and the wildlife, and I think understand on a scale that's far greater than anyone else can imagine, or far greater than I think anyone realistically imagines, the critical role that tourism plays in keeping wildlife and these wild areas conserved and protected.
Actually, it's quite scary to come to realize the impact that tourism has in a place. I mean, there can be a bad impact in numbers of vehicles, and everyone sees this sort of thing online. But what people don't always realize is the positive impact that tourism has in a place, and how without it, conserving that place would be almost impossible. I mean, people's livelihoods depend on tourism. And by visiting these places, you actually can contribute in a very positive way to the environment, to conservation and to uplifting people and giving them jobs and giving them something, giving them a way, I suppose, to make nature conservation part of their actual livelihood. And I think that that's really special.
And it's not just those people who are employed, obviously. I mean, if you think about it, many of our friends in Kenya, probably their income will help us support 5, 6, maybe more family members, extended family.
Sometimes a whole village.
Sometimes a whole entire village, yeah. So closing or stopping tourism can have a serious negative impact on not just the people whose jobs are lost, but entire communities. I mean, if we think about the Mara, where since we've been going, or certainly over the last 5 years, the sort of the buy-in that the community has for this land and these wild creatures that maybe 20, 30 years ago were in conflict, to see the sort of the way that they are keeping wild spaces wild and in fact expanding wild spaces.
Exactly, working to expand wild spaces for nature in a way that benefits people. So I don't know, I think we've been very fortunate to spend enough time there to see that change. And I think probably got 300-400 days over the last
I was going to say, haven't you averaged something like 3 months a year or at least in the Mara the last 5 years?
So we do know it well. I do know it very well. I do know it very well for photography. And I certainly love it. It's certainly a place that it's changed my photography. It's changed how I shoot, and it's changed how I look at images, because when you spend so much concentrated time in a place, you do have to start playing around, and you do begin to experiment. You do begin to look at things differently and challenge yourself. But also it's those vast open plains. It's not something that you really find in Southern Africa. Of course, there are some places, Kafue and Zambia, places like that, where you do have these big grassland areas. But East Africa, for the grasslands, it's very beautiful, and it's very expansive, and it's very inspiring for photography, with the clouds that you get, sort of the big storms you get rolling in, and the way even something like a giraffe looks so small on the horizon relative to these epic storms that you get. It's very exciting photographically. It's a sort of place that I think everyone needs to visit to actually really understand what it's about.
For me, coming from South Africa, when we used to grow up and spend a lot of time in the Sabi Sands or in the Kruger National Park or Kalahari, going into the Mara, it was completely different. Yeah, we very much used to that bushveld, closed bush where you drive around a corner looking, or you're following tracks on the road. But here it was just, as far as the eye can see, you're just sort of picking out animals, looking at gazelles, we were no longer trying to find leopards or lions, cheetahs by prints on the road, but by watching how the behavior of wild animals is potentially changing, or, the alert nature of a herd of gazelle, or suddenly wildebeest or standing at detention looking in one direction.
Completely different way of tracking. Yeah. And it's really cool to get to do both and to get to experience both. But yeah, the guys in the Mara, they are experts. They notice things before you do. But, you spend enough time and you start to develop your spotting eyes. Like, for example, I can tell the difference between a malachite and a Pygmy kingfisher. Now, there are some guides, one might argue James Napasso, who get that wrong quite often. James is a fantastic guide. He's actually won Guide of the Year before, and he's one of our good friends there. And we do have a little joke with the kingfishers, only because actually the first time I ever saw a Pygmy kingfisher after probably 20 years of trying was in the Mara, and we were watching 2 little leopard cubs in a bush. Well, I say we were watching. We knew there were 2 little leopard cubs in the bush, and we were very excited to see them. And all of a sudden, this Pygmy kingfisher, the first one I'd ever seen, just pops up in the bush right next to me, too close to even focus on. And my expression of joy was a little bit too great, that all the vehicles within hearing thought that I'd seen the leopard cubs, and I had in fact not. But I'd finally got to tick off Pygmy kingfisher from my list. Not photographic list, but list. But, I will say, if you want to see a Pygmy kingfisher, the Mara is a great place to go, because all you really have to do is look for leopards, and you are bound to find a Pygmy kingfisher. My count has gone from 1 to somewhere over 100 without really much effort.
Yeah, it's definitely one of our jokes. The Venn diagram of leopard location and Pygmy kingfisher is pretty overlapping.
Pretty much a circle, yeah. Set just south of the equator, the seasons in the Mara vary only slightly across the year between winter and summer, with sunrise and sunset times almost the same year-round. Instead, the environment is dictated by the rains that sweep in as big storms that leaven the plains and nourish the land, providing spectacular photographic opportunities. I mean, of course it's great all of the time, but I really love traveling slightly outside of the peak times. I love traveling in November, December, February, March. Often you get the really big clouds building on the horizon. The rainy season typically starts in April. So March, you get normally beautiful clear mornings, and then you have these big storms that build, and I think it's great for photography, makes for a very dynamic looking landscape. And November's the same. November's a short rains, so you do get some big thunderstorms, but not in a negative way. I think you can use the rain a lot in your photography, and it's something that you sort of look for when you're shooting, is how can I incorporate this? And it makes for different images. So I do enjoy those times. I mean, I've been there pretty much all of the times except really for April. I've been there in May. I've been there when it's very flooded, which has typically been in May, but occasionally happens in December. I guess traveling in summer, of course, it's very green. You get all of the baby animals. You get all of the new life. It's sort of bird song to wake you up every morning. Impalas, babies being born, gazelle babies being born, which means food for all of the predators. So, I mean, it's a great time of year. I love it. But obviously, if you're wanting to see migration crossings, you have to travel not in the off-peak season, you have to travel in the peak season and pretty much hope for the best about seeing your crossing. It's actually not something I love going to the Mara for. I mean, I don't think you do really either. You filmed them a few times before.
Yeah, it wasn't my favourite. I mean, it's great to see. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad I've seen it. I'm glad I've seen, thousands of wildebeest crossing the Mara River. It is a special sighting, but the one thing I will say is I didn't enjoy the build-up to it.
Yeah. It gets very popular, and it's peak season for a reason, and so a lot of people go, and you can end up in those sort of traffic jams, which is not something you really want when you're in the bush. And also, you can spend days and days waiting for a crossing just to have the wildebeest change their mind at the last minute. I mean, they are wild animals, and I suppose it's part of life. But the Mara is so much more than the migration season. It's so much more than migration period. It's the concentration of animals, isn't it? Like, you can't really explain to someone the dense concentration of animals found in the Mara.
No, you can't. I mean, the first time your dad ever travelled with us, it was the thing that was his biggest takeaway. It was he couldn't believe that just everywhere you looked, there was just wildlife of some form or other. That doesn't mean that there's lions every time you go around every corner, but the levels of resident wildebeest, the gazelles, the elands, the hartebeest. I mean, there are just so many creatures, and as I said earlier, the bird life is out of this world.
Yeah. I think it's something actually when I arrive with guests, especially if they haven't been on safari before, they haven't done many safaris, and you land at the airstrip, and between the airstrip and the camp, in that maybe 40-minute drive, you can see 12 different species, and sort of like, oh, there's some elephants just ambling. Oh, look, it's also a giraffe, and look at the warthogs running along there, just some hyenas sleeping next to the road. And that's not something you can put into a brochure and explain to people. It's something that they have to see for themselves. And once they do,
That first time you're sort of flying down into the Mara, and you've got the escarpment house on one side, you're just looking out the windows of the plane, and as you sort of bank in towards the airstrip, and the little guy in a scooter is herring up and down and chasing off all the wildebeest. It's it's something that you just don't really expect to see if it's your first time, particularly if it's your first time on safari. But it doesn't seem to matter how many times we travel there. I always get a thrill when you come over that rise, and suddenly the Mara stretches out to either side of the little plains.
And actually, we should say, not everyone loves flying. You can drive into the Mara. It's a bit of a hair-raising drive. You have to go down a very steep escarpment. But the bush plains I'm not a very good flyer. I'm sure that will come up often in conversation. But The bush planes are great, and actually you're often flying in a caravan or sometimes with a twin otter and sometimes even bigger planes like the Dash 8. And it's not a long flight in from Nairobi. And I think, people need to be aware that they could be on a smaller plane like a caravan, but it doesn't feel like a tiny plane. It doesn't feel scary. And it's sort of a 40 to 50 minute flight. You occasionally have to stop at a different airstrip before you get to your airstrip, but it's sort of all part of the adventure. And I think for anyone who is nervous of flying, you do your research ahead of time, but you're probably going to look back on it with a bit of a thrill thinking about flying into this beautiful environment in this little plane, which is really not that little. At the end of the day, it's only little compared to a big Airbus.
Yeah, I mean, if you do have concerns with things like turbulence in the plane, I mean, there are ways to mitigate that as well. There's early flights into the Mara, there's morning flights out of the Mara on the days that you have to leave.
Yeah, I personally always take the early
we
flights
always
into
do that.
the Mara. Yeah, I think it's nicer, get the whole day there, and also you get to miss all the hot weather. And the cooler it is, the less turbulent flights are. And it's only really just as you go over the escarpment that you get any real bumps when you're flying. So it's not so bad. And as soon as you get over the escarpment and you can start to spot animals, just look out the plane window. I find that helps me. Just try and see how many animals you can spot on your way down. It's not a bad way to pass your time. So what would you say has been something really defining for you or something really special sightings-wise in the Mara that you weren't maybe expecting?
Apart from the quantity and density of wildlife, it's getting to see things like, huge prides of lions, sometimes upwards of 40 members, all spread out across the open plain. Nabosha Conservancy is one area that's really great for those big prides.
Yeah, possibly the highest concentration of lions anywhere in the world, I'd say.
What was the last count we saw? So it was about 140 lions on 54,000 hectares.
Yeah.
And it seems to have been a continuation. It wasn't some fluke or quirk of timing. Nabosha and lions seem to go hand in hand. So for me, that was probably one of the biggest things to take away from the Mara. And you see them at dawn, and as the sun comes up, you just have, enormous spread out pride of lions across the plains, the cubs playing.
And when you have so many lions, you have a lot of cubs, don't you?
Yeah.
It becomes a sort of baby boon. There's just always new cubs. You arrive and you sort of wonder which lionesses are denning now, because such healthy prides, they can protect their youngsters, right? And that's
the thing is, with all these big prides comes a huge amount of protection for these cubs.
And to be fair, the number of times we've seen lionesses carrying cubs there has been pretty good. It's been pretty good for me photographically. I've had with a few sets of guests, actually, we've been able to photograph really small lion cubs being carried, and that's such a special thing. You need a bit of luck to line up for that, but it's one of the places where you could realistically expect at some point to see it, which is, we went so many years not ever seeing it, and since visiting the Mara, I've seen it a lot of times, actually, the whole of East Africa. Of course, East Africa and the Mara aren't just a haven for prides of lions. The rolling open plains create a perfect habitat for one of Africa's most captivating animals, the cheetah. I wasn't a big fan. Those of you who might follow me on Instagram at Dyer Photography, I never used to post a lot of cheetahs. I actually wasn't a massive fan of cheetah until we started visiting the Mara and East Africa generally, until we spent enough time there. And I am just in love with cheetah. Watching how hard the mums work to raise cubs, and the little ones are so adorable, and actually they are such incredibly beautiful cats. I've become a very big advocate for them, and I really do spend a lot of time chasing them. Both of us have flown out at a moment's notice to try and spend time with new cubs, just to try and document their sort of them growing up, I guess. And we've been very lucky to be able to do so. Been very lucky to be able to show lots of my guests tiny cheetah cubs. And it's actually something really special when you show guests their first set of, little fluff balls running around. Cheetah cubs are so personable with with everything that they do, they just run around darting from place to place, climb a tree, almost difficult to photograph actually, because they've got too much energy and they're sort of too erratic in their behavior. But I mean, it must be a hard job for mom, I guess, trying to corral them into place, but it is great photograph.
I mean, yeah, that cheetah cubs and getting to spend time with mother cheetahs definitely is one of the hooks that have kept me in the Mara.
Yeah. But for all the cats it's good. I mean, think
for
about
the
the
cats.
leopards.
But I just meant when you get to see a cheetah at full speed on the open plains, it's definitely something that is, you can't really articulate it, and it's almost more a feeling than a description. It is so much faster than I definitely thought it was. You know, in my head when I imagined it before.
Now might be a good time to show some photos that we really love of cheetah at full tilt. I will say that all my favorite images I've taken of cheetah at full tilt are very slow shutter speed ones. I'm a big believer in sort of a 30th of a second, 40th of a second, maybe 100th of a second for cheetah chases. And I know it's a bit risky, and a lot of people sort of say, wow, are you taking a risk shooting at such slow speeds? Which I know I am, but I just think sometimes you can make something really special in a cheetah chase like that. It takes away a little bit from the death side of thing and sort of shows you the power that these cats have for this one specific advantage that they have in life, and I think that's quite cool. And you know, I think the Mara is the kind of place that inspires you photographically. It does actually encourage you to shoot in lots of different styles. For you, it's really developed your film work with the kind of filming that you can do. And for me, it's definitely developed my photography. I use my wide angle a lot in Kenya. It's a landscape that really lends itself to photographic safaris, but in reality, it is a far more ancient place. A place that has been the center of life for groups of people for thousands of years, long before the advent of cameras, vehicles, or tourism, and whose name the place still carries today. The name Maasai Mara actually comes from the Ma language, which is the language of the local people, the Maasai, and it means spotted or dotted plains, which is in reference to all of the acacia trees and shrubs that just sort of dot these open plains, which are amazing if you can find a leopard in them. Still a dream shot of mine. You know exactly the spot in the bush where I'm hoping to take it. Yeah, so the Maasai are obviously, they're sort of the local, I would say, they are the most local tribe to the area, but they're also sort of the caretakers of wildlife in the area. And the conservancies where we spend a lot of our time are all community owned and run. So those are areas of land that are owned by the Maasai, which they actually lease to the conservancy boards in order to conserve wildlife. And they will be able to bring their cows in there during the daytime. The Maasai are local, sort of herding people. And if you're interested in hearing more about the Maasai, we do have an episode on them coming out. We have a lot of Maasai friends, and actually their culture is incredibly interesting, but it's too much to go into in a short introduction to the Mara video. But they are the local people. A lot of the guides, a lot of the camp staff will be made up with Maasai from the local communities around. So tourism also provides jobs for people who actually live on the outskirts of the reserve. It's a change in a way of life, but it's not that big of a change because they're the kind of people who have always had a symbiotic relationship with nature. They've herded their cows in the same area as these wild animals live. You see the kids walking to school and they're walking through areas where, oh, look, there's a giraffe, or, oh, there could be a lion. Sort of pay attention to what you're doing. And it's quite different, I guess, from the Western world, obviously. And it's really eye-opening to spend time with them and to sort of see their love of nature coming through. And it's a pastoral life, but it's a very gentle symbiosis with nature. It's really wonderful.
When you see these boys, these are young boys. Today is on a weekend, so today is on Sunday. So tomorrow they all go to school. So we get the herders looking after the cows. So it's a big role for these boys to learn to know how the cows get sick. When the cow get lost, they don't go to home that day. You have to spend in a different home because you have to come back home with another cow. Yeah. Yeah, so you better count the cows and take all the cows back home safely.
Do you think some people might disagree in the symbiosis element, given some historical...
I do think so. The Maasai did used to hunt lions as part of becoming a man, was going on a lion hunt. But you know, times change and cultures change, and they've found ways to replace that sort of thing, like the lion hunt, to prove your manhood. They've replaced it with many other things. And even when they used to hunt lions, it was at a time when there were much more lions in the ecosystem. There was much less built up land. There was much more free space, and it's a cultural way of life, and you can't change that overnight. But I think with the advent of tourism and the ability to earn money in different ways, the Maasai culture is changing, but it's also trying to stay the same at the root of what it is, which I think is very important, because it's an interesting culture when you get to know it. The stories that you can hear from the local Maasai are really interesting.
We are going to talk about the origin of the Maasai, because everyone's identity is really very important. Where you have come from, where you want to go, is something very, very nice, very good. It gives you a sense of direction. So we believed, as from stories, the Maasai originally came from, they are one of the families or the clans of the Israelites. We came across the Red Sea, and there are a lot of similarities between the Maasai culture and the culture of the Old Testament and the Bible.
All of the kids now go to school, so they all speak very good English. They all learn English and Swahili in school, which are the two sort of national languages, I suppose, of Kenya. And it's a population where almost every person living there speaks 3 languages, which is amazing. You know, they speak their tribal language and Swahili and English, which is I would say, quite something. It's fairly unique in the world to have so many different spoken languages. And kids are coming through with this love of nature and this desire to go into the tourism industry, because tourism is such a big part of Kenya. And so, of course, there's been historical conflict with wildlife, and, you know, there still is conflict today. But there are also ways of managing that conflict. Sort of as a great example is the conservancies that allow the Maasai landowners to graze their cows through there only during the sort of the daytime after game drive, and they're supposed to be out by the afternoon before you head out on game drive. But if a cow gets killed by a lion, then the community is compensated for the loss of that cow, so that there is no retaliatory killing. And so there are ways that this can happen. And it's actually an interesting model for conservation in Africa, where you do have a conflict between the natural way of life and conserving wildlife and tourism, and finding a way to bring them all together. And I don't think any system is perfect, but it is certainly a system that can work. And it's something that's, I think we'll explore it more. We'll explore it more with some of the guys we know out there, and show you a little bit around sort of what life is really like for the Maasai living on the edge of the Mara.
Thank you for watching. If you like the pod, please like and subscribe, or listen wherever you get your podcasts, and stay tuned for our forthcoming episodes, where not only will we be delving deeper into the Maasai Mara, the conservancies and the people, as well as bringing you more wild destinations, but also talking to people at the forefront of conserving and protecting these incredible wild spaces.